first of all, thank you for joining me on the show.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Terry, what I ask at the beginning of every show is a question around how you do what you love and love what you do. So how do you do what you love and love what you do?
Well, I'll tell you, I have been dealing with helping men and women move beyond patriarchy. And I'll define that at some point if you want, but move beyond traditional gender roles into something more progressive for everybody. I've been doing that for about 30 years. And that's the basis of my therapy work. It's really a post-patriarchal therapy. And it's the basis of my teaching. Now, I grew up with a powerful, violent, depressed father, and I've been meditating on what healthy and unhealthy power looks like in relationships ever since I've been a little boy. So I love this shit, and you know what? I say I am the personal is political, and I consider myself a gender revolutionary, and I'm getting well paid for it. Thank you very much. So,
Perfect. I mean, that's exactly what you need out of a living your passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that patriarchy. So, I mean, is that to do with perhaps the change in social construct over the last 50 plus years, and and how has that changed? Is that what you're referring to when you say patriarchy?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to think about patriarchy is traditional gender roles. So traditionally, we all know the drill. Traditionally, men are inexpressive and stoic and individualistic and strong. And the essence of traditional masculinity is invulnerability. The more invulnerable you are, the more manly you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more girly you are. Look at boys' superheroes. We love men with no flesh at all. Superman is Man of Steel, Terminator. So the problem with centering your identity on a kind of fetish of invulnerability is twofold. First of all, it's a lie. We're not invulnerable. We're human beings. We're full of vulnerabilities. We're fragile creatures in the way of things. And I like to say, trying to run away from your own vulnerability is like trying to run away from your own rectum. It has a follow you wherever you go. And we are human, and we can't escape it.
There was an interesting interview I was listening to where the interviewer talked of we're one of the only species that actually shows our most vulnerable part, our chest, being our most vulnerable part. Most animals, protect that by being on four legs or covered by some kind of protective outer layer. So, yeah, we sort of show ourselves vulnerably, but we tend to also hide it in our postures as well, in the way that we hunch and roll over our chest.
Yeah, that's very true. And we all know the code. Look, when by the time boys are 3, 4, 5 years old, research tells us they've already become inexpressive. They still feel feelings, but they know better than to open their mouth and express them. They've learned the code of toxic masculinity. Now, the problem, I said, was twofold. The first is it's a lie. So you're always insecure. You can never be secure because your foundation is based on a falsehood. The second thing about invulnerability is that you asked about relationships. Let's talk about relationships. Well, relationships are about intimacy. Into me see, and into you see. And intimacy demands vulnerability. This is what Brene Brown has taught us, amongst others. We connect through our human vulnerabilities. Oh, man, my knee is killing me. Oh, your knee, my neck, my kid has been giving me so much grief. Yeah, well, my wife, I've been on the couch for the last week. This is how we connect with each other, is through vulnerabilities. Men don't do that very well. And a lot of men don't like vulnerability in anybody else either, which renders them unsharing, ungiving, and unempathic. This is not a recipe for a good relationship. Traditional roles of men and women were not built for intimacy. They were built for stability.
You mentioned age 3 to 5 there for guys. For boys, that's when it starts. So how come it starts so early for boys and there's nothing there with girls? Is it the father's role there, where they say, don't cry, don't show emotion, or where does it start?
The biggest enforcers of the masculine code are other boys, and then when you grow up, other men. You step out of line. I talk about playground politics. You step out of line on the playground, and now after 50 years of feminism, if a girl crosses over into boy land, it could be bad for her depending on her subculture, what region she lives in, whether she's amongst rednecks, no offense to anybody or whatever. The boy who crosses over into girl land, unless you're in a very progressive little enclave, faces a response that can be truly ugly, even violent. So this stuff is enforced. You learn very quickly that this is how it. Can I tell you a story?
Fire away.
All right. So my son, who has grown up to be an extraordinary man, I could brag about him for the whole show. But my son, when he was 3, was really one of these kids whose feet never really touched the ground. He was a fey child. He loved dress up. He dressed up as a bear. He dressed up as cowboys and Indians. But his favorite dress up was Barbie the Good Witch. And he had this diaphanous white little robe, and he had a tiara, and he had a wand, and he would bless things. Now, you don't mess with my wife, Belinda. I love to tell this story. I always tell it the same way. You don't mess with my wife, Belinda. And a so-called gender expert, a nationally recognized gender expert who happened to be a friend of ours, took it upon herself to call Belinda and to express her concern about my 3-year-old's impending, quote-unquote, gender confusion. And without missing a beat, Belinda says to her, "Oh, my God, I never thought of that. Listen, he dresses up as a bear, too. Do you think he might have species confusion?"
Excellent.
Anyway, so my older son, Justin, 3 years older, was there with a band of boys, and Alexander says, "Oh, this is great." He comes up, he puts on all his regalia, and he comes down, it's like, ta-da! And the boys just look at him, right? They just look at him. And these are nice, crunchy, granola, liberal Cambridge boys, These are blue boys. They didn't say one mean thing. That look was red hot. I got red, my son got red. He went up the stairs, this is an absolutely true story, took off all that gear, put himself in the jeans and the t-shirt, went downstairs with the boys and started making toy guns and swords in my workshop downstairs. And he never touched that dress again, ever. Now, I say this to therapists, would that we had a force for good that was so powerful that without a single word spoken, in 60 seconds, you could take somebody's intense attachment to somebody and break it forever. Would that I knew of something that powerful. That is as powerful as the force of patriarchy. And that force that was leveled against my little 3-year-old son is called shame. The way that patriarchy is enforced in men and boys is through shame. And it's strong.
Very interesting, because to shift any perceptions, say in the modern day, it's like turning the Titanic, if it's that embedded in our system.
It is. And you have to do it differently in your family and in your relationships. And I talk to people, I have, if I can dare say, I have a CD set you can get on my website called Raising Relational Boys and Girls. I like it. And You have to do this in your little family. And I talk to people about creating a relationship cherishing subculture around their families, friends, aunts and uncles, school pals, but people can support the kid's heart, the little boy's heart, and not just his muscle. And then for girls, it does come in, a wound does come in, it's just later, it's at the edge of adolescence, 13, 14, 15. This is Carol Gilligan's work. And at the edge of adolescence, in Gilligan's famous phrase, girls lose their voice. And they start over accommodating and resenting. And that's the traditional role for girls and women, to be over accommodating and resentful. For a man, it's to be inwardly shame-based and outwardly aggressive. And for a woman, it's to be inwardly accommodating and inwardly resentful. Outwardly accommodating and resentful. That's patriarchy.
Right. I did read a quote: "You cannot have a voice without relationships, and you cannot have relationship without voice."
Yes, that's Carol Gilligan. I got that from her.
That's a great quote.
Thank you.
So when it comes to relationships, whether it's with children or partners, is there? I mean, what's the story on expectation? Because I've seen a lot, relationships end where you don't expect it because you don't know exactly what's happening, say behind the scenes. So how do expectations play out in a failed relationship? Because I've had them myself, where I've projected my own expectation on a partner and realised later it's a trap. Yeah, that's right.
What do you expect? What kind of things do you expect?
Well, it might be a case of it might be day-to-day simple things, like, you get home and maybe, and this is not talking about traditional roles, but maybe there was a conversation about dinner, but the dinner wasn't ready at the time and you expected, and that might go both ways. And it's a small thing, but there's this internal resentment that rises up.
All right, I'm going to talk. I have a lot to say about this. Listen, first of all, there's an old AA saying, there's an old 12-step saying, an expectation is a premeditated disappointment.
I love it. That's great.
You don't have expectations in a functional relationship. You have wishes. But you don't have an expectation unless you have an agreement from your partner that they're going to play the game that you have in mind. No contract, no right to an expectation. Just a wish. Now, wishes push us into the subjective. See, expectation is you should, a wish is I would like, and the subjective is much more functional in close relationships than the objective is. Objective reality has very little place in personal relationships. You have to let that go. You have to swallow that bitter pill. It's two subjective realities that are trying to figure out how the hell to get along and coexist with each other. That's the reality of relationship.
It's hard enough. It's hard enough just to make it work in one respect. To have expectations layered on top makes it that much more complex. Better just not to have them, isn't it?
Well, you have wishes.
Wishes, yeah.
But you own them as your wishes, and they're not. See, I'm full of little tricks and tools, but here's a tool. There are three modes of negotiation. There's invitation, request, and demand. An invitation is, do you want to? Want to make love? Want to talk? And it's really based on, no, I don't want to. Okay, fine. Or I do, great. The request is not, do you want to? It's, would you do this as a favor to me? It's important to get those two things straight. I would love for you to pick me up at the airport at 4 o'clock. I don't really want to do that. Bozo, it's not about what you want, it's a request. Okay, got that. That's a request. A demand is, this is how it should be done. And a demand is not functional in a relationship except for emergencies and bottom lines. Demand is not functional. When you talk about expectations, you're on a slippery slope, my friend, because you're heading into demand land.
Well, I mean, I might add at this point that my wife is. When I refer to my expectation, they predominantly come from previous relationships. I'm actually very, very lucky because my wife and I have a very great level of communication when we can we can dig quite deep into what's going on quite quickly. So there's very little in the way of expectation. So it's more about wishes, and it's much more collaborative, which I love. It's just so refreshing, and so much less stress involved in that.
You know, a collaborative relationship. First of all, you're young. How old is it, man? You can tell.
41.
Oh yeah, not that young. You look great.
My wife's 33.
All right. Well, you're from. I'm like 68, so for me, you're close to millennial. Look, you're young, and you have a more egalitarian model for marriage, and the research is really clear. Egalitarian marriages are happier. Egalitarian marriages have less depression in them. And so let me just say something about women. I've said so much about men. The trouble about all this male invulnerability is that it's not what women want from us. Women want connection. How many women drag their male partner to a therapist so that the therapist can bang them over the head and get them to open up and be more relational and be more connected and be more sharing and say more than, sports and weather and show up. And by the way, most therapists will take that woman and throw her right under the bus by trying to be quote unquote neutral and winning the man's trust. And therapists need to support women when women bring men in, asking for them to be more relational. It's a good ask. And we therapists should support it and not pretend that we're neutral about it. Anyway, well, the problem here is that women want more emotional intimacy from men than men have been raised to deliver. The very things that I get Harry in my room and I say to him, Harry, you're a goddamn statistic, man. There are hundreds of thousands of Harrys being dragged to offices just like mine with women who are saying the same things that your wife is saying. Harry needs to open up. Harry needs to share. Harry needs to come out from behind his wall. Harry needs to stop being so passive. I need more of a partner. Harry needs to plan a few things. Wouldn't it be great if one night I came home and Harry had tickets to the theater? That's not what Harry does. Okay, I got it. So here's the deal. I can't blame all 100,000 mothers of you guys. This is not a personal issue. There's something cultural going on. And here's what it is. The very things you learned, Harry, as a boy, whether you wanted to or not, the code that was imposed upon you as a boy, the code of invulnerability, of stoicism, of inexpressiveness, of independence, that code of being a good, strong man will ensure that by today's standards you'll be seen as a lousy husband. There's a role disjuncture between the old traditional code that's still being imposed on boys and the new demands of intimacy that are being imposed on men. And men come to the table, short. And women are dissatisfied. 70% of divorce is instituted by women. Women are not happy with us guys. See, I deal, if I can, I deal with, my beat is people on their last legs. I have a 2-day intervention, people flying from all over the world. I'm the guy you see after this 3 therapists or 6 therapists. The record now is 8 therapists, didn't work. And this is your last stop. 2 days intensive. At the end of the 2 days, you are either back on track or calling a lawyer. This is it. In these cases, I peel the woman off and say, you wait in the waiting room. I want to talk to Bill. And Bill gets me alone. He says, you know what? He says, it's really not that bad around here. If you could just get her, kind of off my back. Men are not unhappy in their marriages. Men are unhappy that their women are so unhappy with them. If the women would just be happy and cheerful and, give them a blowjob every quarter, they'd be delighted.
It's that simple, eh?
Yeah, men are pretty simple. But, but men don't show up with a level of emotional connection that leaves women feeling bereft and angry. And then the way women deal with that is, look, I'm not saying women are angels. Women delivery sucks by and large. It's shrill. It needs to be. I talk to both men and women about, I think the new news, the new frontier for us, relationally and emotionally, is what I call standing up for yourself with love. Standing up for yourself and setting a limit with your partner and having an open heart at the same time. Being able to be assertive and compassionate in the same breath.
So how would somebody do that?
Well, it's the difference between saying, for example, this. Paul, I don't like how you're talking to me. Or saying, Paul, I really want to hear what you have to say. Could you tone it down so I could hear it?
Oh. Cutting.
There's a difference between saying, you will not treat me like that, versus saying, you know what, sweetheart, I'm trying to be close to you, and right now I really feel like you're pushing me away. It's hard. I want to stay close to you. Could you help me?
So it's about it's about bringing about a shared goal, a common goal that you both relate to, and keeping it as an open dialogue, as opposed to the Crucial Conversations book where they talk about silence and violence. Rather than jumping into silence and violence, create an open dialogue.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I love. It's what opens up the conversation versus what shuts it down. What moves the couple into spontaneity and creativity and play versus rigidity and polarization and digging down into your position. It allows for a level of mutual respect, but what it really is at its deepest level it's a vision of relationality. It's a vision of connection and relationship. That the vision itself goes beyond patriarchy. Look, happy wife, happy life. You move from the patriarchal perspective, which is a domination perspective, one up, one down, right? And dominion over the earth and all of this thing. Bad idea, it turns out. We don't want dominion. We want collaboration. Much better. So we're moving into a new vision of what love looks like.
Right, great. And this next section, Terry, is called the middle bits, where I'm going to ask you some quickfire questions.
Okay, great. And you want quickfire answers?
The answers can be whatever they are, so if it leads into another conversation, let's go with it. Are you ready for the middle bits?
Mm-hmm.
What's your number one tip for a fulfilled life?
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth so it doesn't hurt anymore?
No, tell the truth. It hurts more often, but it gets you a better life. That's my summary of the whole of Sigmund Freud. The best of Sigmund Freud, you know what it is? You feel worse and your life gets better. That's therapy. You open your heart. So, no, there's more pain. There's also more joy. There's more everything.
Okay, so tell the truth until it doesn't hurt anymore.
You won't let go of that, will you? Okay.
Yeah, that's a great one. Tell the truth. So it's just... and the other thing about telling the truth is, the more they tell the truth, you don't have to think of a lie. You don't have to remember what you said. Just tell the truth.
It's relaxing. It's actually relaxing to be in integrity, as my sex addict friends say, to be in integrity and to be in the truth. It's also great for therapists. I tell therapists that I have such a relaxing day. I just sit in my chair and I tell people the truth, my truth about what I see. And we therapists do all this fancy stuff, but I just sort of say, well, this is what's going on. Try and have a real conversation. I talk about fierce intimacy. And fierce intimacy means that you take each other on, that you deal with the issues. You don't let things fester. You don't say, well, I'll just let it ride, when you know in your heart you're not letting shit ride. You are keeping the tally. Don't do that. If it matters to you, duke it out. If you're ready to let go of it all the way down. But don't walk around not telling your partner the truth because you're afraid you're going to set up, or you don't want to hurt them, or you're not worth it, or it's not that bad. Don't do that. Be passionate about your own self-care and what you want and what you need in the relationship. Is a way of keeping the relationship vital. The first thing that goes when you stop taking each other on and stop telling the truth to each other is passion. Things get dead. Resentment builds, generosity dries up, sexuality dries up, and it just gets dead. So don't do it. Take the risk.
Interesting point there about passion, because, you know, you look at a new relationship that's full of that high passion, and it's lively, it's heated, let's say. Yet then that relationship sort of settles. It evolves into more of a steady level. But I find that I've seen that a lot of relationships fall apart quite quickly, say after a year, because they think that the spark's gone, but it's just changed. So is it that if you say it's love, high passion and love, and as a steady level, how can people recognize that and go, okay, well, it's just not the same?
Yeah, it's chemically not the same. Your brain is flooded with neurotransmitters and a bunch of dopamine, and there's a great tale that comes to you for the first year of being in love. It's very sexy, and it's just delicious. Ride that baby out for as long as you can, because when it goes, it goes. I had the privilege of speaking to Ed Tronick, who I like a lot. Ed is one of the creators, one of the founders of infant observational research, taking a camera and filming a mother and an infant over 5 hours and really looking at what's going on. And I took from Ed my basic paradigm of relationships from mother-infant relationship, but now generalized out to all relationships. The paradigm is all relationships are an endless dance of harmony, disharmony, and repair. Closeness, disruption, and a return to closeness. And this can play out 60 times during the course of one dinner conversation, quite unconsciously almost, or it can play out over decades as phases of a relation. You're talking about phases of a relation. Now look, the harmony phase is that honeymoon phase, and where you're flooded with all these chemicals and you're having tremendous sex life, and you're kind of obnoxious to be around, but everybody else is not answering your calls. Anyway, it's that gooey first phase, a very narcissistic first phase, and it's lovely. Disillusionment, I call that phase love without knowledge. You have a deep soul connection with the person, but you don't know what they're like in the trenches. You don't know what their bills look like or their closet. The second phase is disillusionment. And if it doesn't come before, you can pretty much guarantee it'll come with children. And disillusionment is, God damn it, you are not who I thought you were. You are not who you promised me you were. I've been had. This is terrible. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. When you are looking at your partner through that lens, that is disillusionment. That's the disruption phase. And I call that knowledge without love. Now you're seeing your partner's warts and moles with crystal clarity, but you don't love them very much. In fact, you hate their guts. I talk about normal marital hatred. And I got to tell you, I've been traveling the world talking about this for 20 years, and not one person has ever come backstage and said to me, "Well, what do you mean by that?"
It resonates with people.
Everybody gets it. Anyway, that's that second phase of disillusionment. Now, our culture does not prepare couples to deal with that fall. And we deny that it even exists. It is not part, it does not mean you're in a bad relationship. It is part of it's the belly of the relationship. It's the shadow of the relationship. The third phase is mature love or knowing love. You know the way your partner leaves her underwear on the floor and it drives you crazy, but you choose to love her anyway. And that's mature love. And these relationships that fall apart after a year, the heat wears off and there's nothing left. They don't know how to get through disillusionment into repair, or there isn't enough connection at different, multi-factored connection, multifaceted connection between the two that make it worthwhile once the heat goes. But mostly, and I worry about young people. I'm a big fan of millennials in many ways, but I do worry that we're not equipping our young people to deal with disillusionment and disappointment. They have it in their lives because of the financial downturn and the god-awful politics that are going on right now, and their own sort of decreasing standard of living versus their parents. So they have it at the broad-based level, but between you and me, I fear that relationships are becoming more disposable. It's like, if this isn't working, let's just get out. And the part of that is because I think people don't know what to do. They don't know how to get through it.
Terry, whose work has influenced your work? Is there a mentor, coach, or someone who's influenced you to get into what you do, or along the way you've grown this sort of attachment or connection with a mentor?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I a few. It's like my work is a melange of my gift, if I have any, is synthesizing and not being a snob about being in a silo and not paying attention to the silo next to me. So I've had a lot of influence and inspiration from the 12-step recovery community, the inner child work that people started doing in that community 50 years ago, which prefigures the kind of parts work that people are doing now, Dick Schwartz and so forth. But PM Melody has been a great influence in my life. The women of the Stone Center, the feminist psychologists of the 70s, Jean Baker Miller, Carol Gilligan, the women who debunked the idea of autonomy for women and said women grow in connection, not by autonomy. And then I have to say, one of the first generation of men to say publicly that men don't grow through this autonomy myth either. Men are just as relational as women are. We grow embedded in relation. And the whole separation mythology that boys must leave their mothers and go off into the world and separate from their mothers that are going to be sort of perpetual mama's boys. It's just such bullshit. You don't have to leave a relationship in order to grow. You have to negotiate the relationship into a more spacious relationship that will accommodate you in growth. But the separation language is pure patriarchy. It's pure masculine mythology. It does a lot of damage in people's lives.
Absolutely. Is there one word that you could choose that sets your intention? So I like to choose a word before I go into a meeting or an interview or make a plan. So is there a word that you could choose that sets your intention for the coming 12 months for you?
Wow. I could. I just had a moment that was all too real. I could be funny and just say, yes, there's a word that sets my intentions for the next 12 months: passive income. But I'm not going to say that. It did just float into my brain. I'm out to do my best to save the world. It's really that simple. I think patriarchy, look, I talked about dominion. The essential mistake of patriarchy is power over, is dominion. And it's particularly dominion of the masculine over the feminine, including technology over Mother Nature. And we are selfish children of Mother Nature. and we have the classic Greek disease of hubris, overarching pride. We think we can handle this. And you replace the patriarchal model of dominion with an ecological model of relationship. You're not above the system, you're in the system. You are a subcomponent part of the system, and you operate with the humility of understanding that, rather than thinking you stand above it and you're working on it. So, for example, you can choose to pollute your marriage by venting your rage over there, but you're going to be breathing that pollution in the form of your wife's frigidity and coldness to you over there. It's a system. Your relationship is your biosphere. And I talk to men in particular about being an enlightened self-interest. I don't speak about altruism. If you're not doing it for anybody else, you're doing it for yourself. It's in your interest to take care of your biosphere because, hey, guess what? You're in it.
Homeostasis almost.
I like to say to men, why should you want to please your wife? Well, knock, knock, you live with her.
Love it. You actually mentioned an interesting thing there around the inner child work that you've done. How are we shaped by the childhood in that, we take our experiences as a child and they play a huge role in the way that we relate as adults. So there was an interesting film I watched. It was on Oscar Wilde, his lover Bosie, who through his youth despised his father's overbearing authoritarian homophobia. Yet later in Bosie's life, he became his father. He took on a lot of those traits and behaviors. So we try our hardest not to be like our parents, but we tend to take on their traits and behaviors, and they bleed into our adult relationships. How can we break that cycle, that ever-repeating cycle?
I'll tell you how. Through, and again, sorry for the plug, but I'm trying to help people. If you go to my website, terryreal.com, just TerryReal, my name, terryreal.com, I have a online 8-hour course called Staying in Love, and it's basic general skills for human being about relationship. Self-esteem, boundaries, how to ask for what you want, how to respond, how to repair, how to cherish, and what to do when your partner's being a jerk and you don't want to be a jerk with them. Tell me again the question, I just lost it.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, on that, we'll make sure that there's links to your website as well. So anyone who's listening who wants to jump on and get that information, get that content, or learn more, they can go to our show notes, and there'll be a link to your website on there as well. The question was, in that we try our hardest not to be like our parents, yet we take on their behaviors. How do we break that cycle?
So you break that cycle through, that's why I was thinking about the video, because I go into this in detail. You break that cycle through what I call relational mindfulness, through what I call second consciousness. You have your knee-jerk response, which comes right out of your family of origin. Comes right out of your family role. You're a hero, you're a scapegoat, you're a lost child. You go to fight. There are 3 knee-jerk responses: fight, flight, or fix. And you can flee, by the way. You can stand 6 inches away from somebody and be fleeing. We call that stonewall. Anyway, that's your knee-jerk response. I call it whoosh. W-H-O-O-S, comes like a wave over you. In a good moment, you have a second consciousness. You have something else beyond the flood that says, take a breath. Don't call her a blankety, blankety, blank, blank, blank. That's not going to get you anywhere. Just take a breath and calm down. That second consciousness is the consciousness of your prefrontal cortex, your what we call functioning adult part of you. It's not the triggered limbic system or child part of you. And what I talk to men and women about, that's what I call the proto skill. That's the first skill you have to start mastering, to shift out of that triggered little boy or little girl into the functional adult. Now, it helps to know who that little boy and little girl is. And so we do work to get to know your trauma background, what happened to you, what's the inner story, what did you adapt to. The way these things get carried on is through adaptation, what I call the adaptive child part of us. There's the wounded child part of us, very young. There's the functional adult part of us, which is a present-based, here we are. And then there's the adaptive child, which is the repertoire, it's your character. It's what most people think of as their character, but it's really not. It's a child's version of what a character should look like. So it's black and white, and it's brittle, and it's rigid, and it's harsh, and it's immature. And then there's the functional adult. When you move out of your adaptive child into your functional adult, you're breaking the legacy. Because the legacy is transmitted, is stored in the adaptive child, and then reenacted by the adaptive child. The functional adult can stop it.
Because there's not much space between stimulus and response. There's probably less than a second from that moment that you become pissed off to that moment you react to that. How can you spread that time frame, create more space between stimulus and response?
You breathe. We do a lot of breathing in relational work. You breathe.
Okay.
And, I don't have time to get into all this with you, but we start teaching people how to notice when they're one down in shame, when they're one up in grandiosity, to know where they are, to have the physical anchors of that so they can tune into that as they go through their day. And how to bring yourself up from the one down in real time as it's happening. How to bring yourself down from the one up. And how to begin practicing that. And it's a practice. It's like going to the gym. It's like building muscles. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But you can begin. Look, our relationship to relationships under patriarchy is passive. You get what you get, and then you react to it. And that includes our relationship to ourselves. I'm talking about introducing a technology that shifts what we get. We have something to say about what we get. We don't just, it's not passive about it. So, for example, you could say to somebody, I want to vent right now, and what I would love from you is 10 minutes of just empathic listening. Don't problem solve, just say, that fucking sucks. Tell me more about it. Just be a pal. And you ask for it up front rather than don't ask for it. Then the person you're talking to moves into problem solving, meaning well, and you're sitting there getting more frustrated by the moment and blaming them for it. So I want people to be more proactive up front and less reactive on the back end. These are all skills that can be learned. And these are the skills that break the legacy. But the first skill is what I call remembering love, remembering to center yourself, remembering to come out of that trigger, remember to not indulge that action. Yes, let the wave wash over you. Feel it. Don't try and get in the way of it or repress it or feel it, but be transparent to it. Just let it wash over you and then take a breath. Look, this sounds very, very difficult to do when we're talking about an adult relationship. But guess what? You do it every day with your kids. Do you not? Are there not times when you want to throw the little buggers out the window and you just feel that and you don't? You're not asking me, well, how do I get a grip and not throw them out the window? It happens so quickly. But when it comes to your wife, then it's, well, I'm such a victim. It happens so fast. I don't know if I can control it. But you do it all the time.
I can answer that question about the kids in about 7 months after my wife's given birth to our first child.
Okay. Well, it's good that we're having this conversation up front.
That's right, yeah. Terry, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before we say goodbye, could you tell us what's coming up for you, what you've got in the pipeline, and how people can connect?
Yes, the best way to connect is through my website. Just go Terry Real. Just Google Terry Real, and it will take you to terryreal.com, which is the website. Get on the email so you keep abreast of what we're doing. Write in, say stuff to me about what you'd like. Follow me on Facebook. You can do that. And look at some of the videos and tapes I have available for you to tune into.
I want to say, actually, anyone who is listening, jump on the Facebook page for Terry, because there's some great stuff on there. You come on and you do some lives on there, so we get to hear some real-time insights from you. So I definitely recommend it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your energy, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure for me as well. Thanks for having me on.